Thank you so much for joining me here
Thank
today.
you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. So, Lewis, you are the Senior VP of Innovation and Media Monks. You also have a really cool title, which I am super jealous about. Member of the Metaverse Council at the World Economic Forum.
That's true, yeah.
Is that like a bucket list type of, that's pretty cool.
It's insane. It's something I never thought I'd be a part of, but I'm very grateful to have the opportunity.
Yeah, no. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But you say that you're a problem solver who identifies basically innovative digital opportunities for the brands that you work with and their partners to look at, future opportunities. And you have a very interesting quote on your LinkedIn profile, which I love because my favorite word is in there. You're a maker of difficult stuff and you use new technology to create new rad stuff. It's so American, right?
It's very American.
What does that mean?
So, I've been a person, my entire career has been built around doing difficult things and using advanced imaging to do things, whether it's bullet time, whether it's VR. I have 2 Guinness World Records for doing VR stuff. I like telling stories at the margins, and I like using technology to do that. I think that when we use new technology, we have opportunities to tell stories in ways that haven't been codified. No one can tell me what the rules are of new mediums because they're not written. And so having that opportunity has meant that I get to do, frankly, really insane stuff. Whether it's live streaming Post Malone in VR. We just did that with our partners Westbrook and Meta earlier this year. Actually, I directed a 40-minute album launch at 8K in VR. It launched out to like 20 different platforms on Meta, and I get to do stuff like that. That's frankly really, really hard to do as well. You can imagine how difficult it is to work with 8K video, let alone in stereo, let alone in VR. But the opportunity means that on set and when we build these new things, we don't have people telling us the rules, and we create them, and we're able to innovate in those spaces. And part of where this new shift in culture and new spaces has been amazing for me is the opportunity to tell stories. I don't come from a traditional background. I didn't go to Harvard, Yale, Oxford. My father didn't write a TV series. He's an English teacher. And so being able to tell stories in a non-traditional manner has been how I've done stuff. And a lot of this stuff, I say rad stuff. I grew up in California. And I did skateboard a lot as a kid, and a lot of the stuff that I seek to do, I think it may not always be the smartest thing, but it's always fun and it's always enjoyable. When we've done sports in VR as well, and when we do that, we're giving people enjoyment and we're creating entertainment, and that's what I seek to do, and I get to do it as a job, and it's incredible.
Well, I was just about to say, hearing your story there, this role, the Senior VP of Innovation sounds perfect for you, right? It's all about creativity and...
I did ask for, so they asked me what I wanted to do, and our founder, a guy called Wesley DeHar, who's a friend of mine, said, what do you want to be? I was like, I don't really know what you do. And I was a solutions director when I first joined.
Okay.
And I said, I don't like that, because I go in a room with clients, they're like, you're a solutions guy. And so I was the creative solutions director.
Oh, okay.
And now he said, what do you want to do next? And I was like, well, I think I'll be the Svp of Innovation. And I originally submitted for, it was like Admiral of Innovation or something ridiculous.
Nice.
And PwC didn't like that. And so I became the SVP. And our job, we're a 9,500 person company, headquartered here in Amsterdam. And we seek to tell stories in digital spaces. And we're an advertising agency. We're a production company. We're creators. It really changes on the project and the day, which is part of what's so enjoyable about these new spaces.
Well, I've had a lot of, these conversations with people about storytelling, because people don't remember facts and figures. They remember the stories and that connection that they make. Even in a virtual environment like here, they're going to remember hearing about you skateboarding and all of these things, right? And the word rad. I'm fairly certain I remember
absolutely
rad.
It's my catchphrase.
Where do you see creativity from? Like, where do you get some of these, do you have any, if you feel like, okay, I want to come up with a solution or a new thing. Do you have a go-to?
So that's where Rad comes in. Like straight up, like honestly, I look at stuff that I think is cool.
Yeah.
And if it's fun.
Yeah.
And if it's exciting, and I think about a lot, because a lot of the time my job is to work with brands to figure out like how do they do something that people actually watch.
Yeah.
We're in an era where attention spans are constantly fragmented.
Yes.
And in order to create connection and create memory, there's interesting like psychological theory that interaction creates that, and engagement creates that. And when I think a lot of the traditional broadcast storytelling models are broken in the sense that like there's so much about a one-way communication, which isn't fun, isn't connective. And so I look to Twitch a lot.
Yeah.
I watch streamers. I play a lot of video games.
Yeah.
Like I played video games the entire flight here. I just got a Steam Deck, super stoked on that. Playing this game Stray right now about a stray cat. And I look at like new forms of art as ways of storytelling. I think we're in this new digital age where if it's not interactive, I think it's kind of broken now. And you think about as storytellers and creators need to lean into interactive forms in the sense that I think the paradigm of user or viewer and creator and user and consumer, it's all breaking down. And I think we're in the age of content creation right now, and the opportunities for storytelling are myriad, but at the same time, if we don't lean into these new different ways, it's pretty bad. Like you saw the Nielsen reports a couple weeks ago, and I part of what I lean into, if you look at in my presentation earlier today, there's a video you can find on YouTube of a baby getting angry at a magazine because it can't swipe at it like an iPad.
Oh, yes.
And so it's trying to use a magazine like an iPad.
Yeah.
And like, no offense to babies, but they're effectively like stupider than golden retrievers. And so like, if you're telling me that a golden retriever is trained to use an iPad, what is that human going to be like in 10 years?
Yeah.
When their language center has formed around that? What are they going to think TV is like? They're going to think TV is broken.
Yeah.
And so as we look at this paradigm shift that's going where like traditional, and I hate to say this, but traditional viewership, like those demographics line up with heart disease demographics. Like they're literally dying. There's a changeover. Media creators and content creators have to look at the fact that their future audience is an audience that is pissed off at magazines because they're not interactive.
Yeah.
And like, so to answer, like when I think about creativity, it's where I look at how particularly young people engage with forms.
It all depends on the audience, right? You know, because I was speaking to someone yesterday and I love picking up a traditional book or a newspaper.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes it's overload of information. You know, when you've got your phone, you've got your laptop, you've got a tablet, you've got, sometimes I just need to go into my little space and just be there, right? So it depends on the audience and what they prefer as well.
I agree completely. And I think I'm not saying traditional media is dead, and I'm not saying any of that has changed. And in the same sense that like, I'm sure there are articles from like the 17th century that are like, well, paintings are killing the sculpture. And like, I know for a fact, like when the telegram came out, there were tons of articles about how it's going to destroy society, how it was particularly bad for women because it was the telegram and and like that happened with the phone too, that happened with television, that happened with radio. And so I'm not saying that it's killing anything, but I am saying that it's changing and we have to take advantage of these new forms.
I couldn't agree anymore. So that brings us nicely on to the metaverse.
Yeah.
You know, it's only really started becoming a thing, I think, in sort of, you know, in events, for example, and broadcasting, whilst it's been actually a big part of like gaming and things for a long time.
A really long time.
So how do you see this implementation going in the wider sort of, you know, community, if we put it that way?
It's a really good question. So I have a lot of problems with the word metaverse.
Yeah. Okay.
It immediately makes people sort of feel like cringy, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like it may or may not be branded
Yeah.
It's very loaded.
Yeah.
It's literally from a sci-fi book.
Yeah.
And I'm a full, complete believer in the metaverse. It's happening.
Yeah.
There it is, but it's at like a primordial stage right now. And I like thinking about a lot of this in the context of virtualization.
Yeah.
And in the sense that we are, as a culture, virtualizing. And as a people, we're leaning into more, the same way we leaned into digital behaviors, we're leaning into virtual behaviors. And value is created, whether it's financial or whether it's cultural. It's happening. It's very early. It's happening slowly. I'm a huge proponent of VR, but I don't think everybody's going to be in a VR headset 4 hours a day next week. There isn't enough like literal like lithium ion, what's nickel cadmium in the entire world to supply that.
Yeah.
Like it's just not there.
Yeah.
But we can't deny the fact that we are in a place where connectivity, where culture, where virtual matters just as much as physical and has a connection, and identity is formed in those spaces. And like as broadcasters in particular, because we are at a broadcast conference, it represents a whole new set of venues for us to engage and for us to create in. And when you look at some of these things, and like the biggest of them is that Travis Scott concert that Fortnite did, where 27.7 million people went. So when you look at, and when is concurrent viewers, and they're not concurrent viewers is actually higher. This is people, unique players. So this is people who had their hands on controllers in the space. So if you compare that to a physical event, like physical events of that size are basically like Rock in Rio and religious pilgrimages.
Yeah.
And so you're looking at a massive scale and a massive scale for opportunity in that space. And that's where, like as a broadcaster and as a content creator, I get really excited. Like from an events perspective, you're talking about the possibility of having hundreds, if not thousands of new venues to play in, to engage, to create. And that's where it's the sky's the limit, and we have a huge opportunity to grow. But I think we have to remember that like it's happening. And I like it's not a hype. Like it is happening. If you talk to anyone under the age of probably 25, they are spending a decent portion of their life in these metaverse spaces. They're engaging and interacting and building community. It is a commonplace, everyday part of their lives, not just this is random.
I'm going to go into the metaverse today.
No,
it's like
it's not like
their everyday life. Right?
It's just like dude, I'm going to go do that. And like my friends, like I have friends that are my friends from playing Fortnite together.
Yeah.
And like I have memories of like blowing up helicopters together that are like the same as regular memories.
Yeah.
Which is interesting and really exciting from a human connection perspective. And so if we acknowledge that and we engage with that, like, I mean, there's so much we can do together.
It's all about the experience, right, that you have. What you mentioned is, like even when you attend an event like this, you're going to remember the people you meet and what you experience.
Yeah.
I remember very clearly, I did a team building event in the VR headset. I remember it because I was so afraid of heights that I sat like a ball on the floor. It wasn't great, but I will remember it.
Yeah, of course.
So,
but do you remember the last Zoom call you were on?
No, probably
Zoom.
not. No.
Well, that's the thing.
You can trash Zoom.
I don't know, man. Like, but the point, but the reason why that is, so there is like there's a paper. I think it's published by Oxford. It might be by Mayo, where as humans and as primates, we form memory easier through shared interactions.
Yeah.
So you do a thing together.
Yeah.
You form a memory.
Yeah.
And so your memory is not just like, last Tuesday we were on a call together talking about the thing.
Yeah.
I have no idea what calls I was on last Tuesday.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, who was on a call with me. No memory at all. I will have to pull up notes.
You will have to look in your diary.
But last Tuesday night, I played Fortnite with my buddy Derek in California. We both had lightsabers. It was super tight. And then we got beaten up by this dude called Goku, who's a Dragon Ball Z character. And I remember that. I remember like getting to the end, getting the final, being stoked, and then just getting trounced. And like I remember it like a memory. And so that's because it was a shared experience.
Yeah.
And in the same sense, you remember like being afraid of heights, we have to lean into that. And that's really, really cool that we have the opportunity to play in all these spaces and that like IPs, because I just mentioned 2 completely different IPs in the same space.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
of course. Yeah.
It's thrilling.
And you know what? I'm going to remember what you did last Tuesday.
Yeah, because it's cool. It's a good story.
That is, it really is. No, you're absolutely right. So what, like, you know, as we said, you're a member of the Metaverse Council.
Yeah.
What do you guys do then? Like, are you focusing on adoption?
So my particular area is around value creation.
Yeah.
And I'm also a big part of sustainability and inclusion.
Amazing.
And so from a value creation perspective, it goes back to the rad stuff. I think far too often when people create new technology, they stop thinking about what's fun and cool and just start making a thing. And they're like, yeah, it's cool because it's the thing. And you're like, no, you have to remember, make stuff that people want.
Yeah,
always.
Absolutely.
Make stuff that you or someone who you like would use. Because if you're making something that's like that, it probably sucks.
Yeah.
And then from a sustainability perspective, S4 was the first media company and agency to sign Amazon's climate pledge. I'm very big on sustainability, and virtualization gives us a tremendous opportunity to lean into sustainability and show that virtual is just as good as physical, and frankly has a significantly lower carbon footprint. In the same sense, when we talk about virtualization as it relates to inclusivity, a virtual space is almost inherently an inclusive space and inherently an accessible space. From a workplace perspective, if I'm working virtually, I can connect with anybody anywhere. It doesn't matter where you are unless you don't have access to internet. And like that's another major aspect is I think that access to internet is a basic human right.
It should be,
well, it is in 3 European countries, actually. It's on their Bill of Rights.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Estonia
actually.
was the first. It's a basic human right on the same level of access to clean water.
Wow.
And in my mind and in the mind of the Estonian government, access to internet means access to capital, access to grow. And you have major cities like New York City. Do you know that 35% of New Yorkers don't have access to the internet?
Wow.
Yeah. And so that divide is really, really big. And when you start looking at that, if we're going to talk about the metaverse happening, I don't want it to repeat the same hegemonic practices that we had before. Also I head up our employee resource group around disabled people. I'm disabled, and a metaverse place can be accessible. It can be adaptable. Games companies have been doing incredible work designing accessibility features in even the biggest games. It's not a second thought.
Yeah.
And so I, as part of that council, help advise how we can lean into that and how all these things connect into one place. We also have to look at, as technology races forward, it creates incredible waste. I mentioned nickel cadmium at the beginning of this call. Like, if all of us were to have VR headsets tomorrow, all 7 billion of us, there isn't enough above ground.
Yeah, no, of course.
And so we have to look at how we can work together to use new technology to solve those problems so people can have access while at the same time we're not strip mining the ocean floors.
So it's so much more than just being about the metaverse. It's about accessibility to, some of these things, which is amazing to hear. Last question.
Yeah, sure.
You've obviously given us a number of different projects you worked on, which sounds incredible. You also were recognized as a Lumiere Award winner.
Yep.
You're gonna blow your own horn here now. What is one project that you remember and will always sort of cherish?
Oh man.
Probably so many, but
I mean, my 2 favorite projects. I'll do them quickly. I worked on Shark Week a couple years ago in VR, and that was a childhood dream. It was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
And it was cool to bring that experience to other people and that emotional connection that you can have with wildlife. And sharks get such a bad rap.
Yeah.
They're emotional animals like dogs.
Yeah.
And they're very sweet and can be very kind and interactive. But like probably my favorite project is the biggest thing I've ever done, which was the Post Malone concert launch for 12 Karat Toothache. His tour actually starts today, and
Wow.
I mean, the amount of humans that saw a thing that I had made was wild.
Yeah.
And when we built it, Meta, I've been doing VR for 7 or 8 years now, and it's so frequently you have to fight to be VR first because people don't understand it or don't get it. And Meta, basically everything I asked for, I got. And so like, I want bigger fire, I want sets that rotate, I want things that move. So Post and I built this story along with his creative director, Lewis James, who's another Lewis. We were able to make this emotional, and it's a really intense record about loss, about recovery. And we were able to connect emotionally through this piece and create something that was really meaningful for fans that couldn't go to shows right away, and to create a connected space where people could connect. That's really, really moving. I think anytime, look, life is really hard. Like it just is, like shit sucks for the past 2 years. It's been really awful, man.
Yeah.
And like, I remember at the top of the pandemic, like, I mean, I lived in Brooklyn, like, and I lived like 7 blocks from the global epicenter.
Yeah.
And like, it was gnarly, but I would go into VR once a week, watch like basketball games in VR with my friends in California, and I was out of that. And that connection was what I valued and the projects that I've been happy with.
That honestly, thank you so much for sharing all your experiences. I feel like I've had an amazing experience just having this talk with you.
I'm having a blast.
So thank you for sharing. Hopefully you'll remember this next week.
I'll remember this, absolutely.
So it's not another one of those. Thank you so much, Lewis. Really appreciate it. And thank you all of those of you who's joined us online. Hope you enjoyed this conversation equally as much as both Lewis and I did. And feel free to obviously to connect with Lewis online as well. I'm sure he would love to hear from all of you. And we'll see you very soon again for another interesting conversation.